I've been a pharmacist for 11 years. Most of those years were unremarkable. I filled prescriptions, counseled patients on drug interactions, recommended cough syrups to tired mothers. Normal work. Ordinary life. The kind of career you describe at dinner parties and people nod politely and change the subject. But for the last 14 months, I've worked at Howell's Family Pharmacy in Carden, Missouri, population 2,400, if you're generous, and I need to talk about what's been happening. Not because I understand it. I don't. I need to talk about it because last Tuesday, I found my own handwriting in the dispensing log, filling a prescription I have no memory of preparing, for a patient whose name doesn't appear in our system, at 3:47 a.m. on a night I was supposedly alone. Let me start from the beginning. I took the Carden position out of necessity. My wife and I had separated. I was sleeping on my brother's couch in Jefferson City, drinking too much, filling out applications with the desperation of a man who needed structure more than money. Howell's was the only place that responded within a week. They needed someone for overnights. Specifically, the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. Tuesdays through Saturdays. The pay was surprisingly good. Almost suspiciously good, looking back. The pharmacy itself sits at the end of a county road, Route 9, about 4 miles outside the center of Carden. It's housed in what used to be a hardware store, and the building still has that wide, flat-roofed look of a place that once sold lumber and nails. Inside, it's been converted into a functioning pharmacy, narrow aisles, fluorescent lighting, a consultation window, and a back room with a dispensing counter, a small fridge for insulin and temperature-sensitive medications, and a wall of labeled bins. There's a single camera above the front entrance. The feed runs to a monitor behind the counter. Black and white. Grainy. It shows the parking lot, the road, and a slice of the cornfield across the way. At night, the field is just a dark wall. I was trained by the outgoing pharmacist, a man named Dale Purcell, who was retiring after 22 years at Howell's. Dale was in his 60s, thin, quiet, with the careful movements of someone who had spent decades measuring things precisely. He showed me the system, the inventory protocols, the alarm codes. He was patient and thorough. On my last training night, after we'd closed out the register and I was getting ready to take over solo the following week, Dale sat down on the stool behind the counter and looked at me for a long time without speaking. "You'll do fine," he said. "It's quiet out here." Mostly quiet. I waited for more, because his tone suggested more was coming. "Some nights, you'll get customers who come in late. Real late. 2, 3 in the morning. Don't be alarmed by that. Carden's got shift workers, insomniacs, farmers who keep odd hours. It's normal." I nodded. "But sometimes," he said, and he paused. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Sometimes you'll get a feeling about someone. Not a dangerous feeling. Not like that. More like a recognition that something about the interaction doesn't quite line up. The prescription will be valid. The ID will check out. The insurance will process. Everything will be correct. But something will feel slightly off. Like the pitch of a conversation is wrong." I asked him what he meant. He shook his head slowly. "I can't describe it better than that. You'll know it when it happens. And when it does, just fill the prescription. Don't ask questions beyond what's medically necessary. Don't make small talk. Be professional, be efficient, and let them leave." I almost laughed. "Dale, that's just good customer service." He didn't smile. "Yeah," he said. "I suppose it is." He left that night, and I never saw him again. I heard he moved to a sister's house in Florida. I tried calling the number the store owner had on file for him about 4 months in, when things started bothering me. The number was disconnected. My first few weeks were uneventful. The overnight shift at a rural pharmacy is exactly what you'd imagine. Long stretches of nothing, punctuated by the occasional headlight sweeping across the parking lot. I'd fill the handful of prescriptions queued for the next morning, organize stock, clean the counters. I listened to a lot of podcasts. I read. I drank too much coffee from a machine in the back that produced something closer to warm brown water than actual coffee. The store was never fully silent. The fluorescent tubes above the dispensing area had a low, persistent hum, a sound you stop noticing after an hour but that fills the space like a frequency you feel in your teeth. The refrigeration unit for the medications clicked on and off in cycles, roughly every 40 minutes. The heating system pushed air through the vents with a soft, papery whisper. And the building itself made sounds. Settling sounds. The creak of metal expanding and contracting. A faint ticking from somewhere in the ceiling that I never identified. I got used to it. All of it. My first late-night customer came on a Wednesday, around 1:15 a.m., during my 3rd week. A woman in her 40s, wearing a heavy coat, with a prescription for amoxicillin. Upper respiratory infection. She was polite, a little tired, paid cash. I filled it in 10 minutes. She thanked me and left. I watched her taillights disappear down Route 9 on the monitor. Normal. Completely normal. Over the next month, I had maybe a dozen late-night customers. All of them were ordinary. Ear infections, blood pressure refills, a man who needed his metformin and had forgotten to pick it up during the day. I started to think Dale's warning was just the eccentricity of a man who'd spent too many years alone in a building at night. Then came the night in November. It was a Tuesday. My first shift of the week. Cold outside, the kind of Missouri cold that doesn't announce itself, just seeps into everything. I'd arrived at 9:45 p.m., relieved the day shift tech, and settled in. By midnight, I'd finished the morning queue and was reading a paperback I'd brought from home. At 2:08 a.m., I remember the time because I'd just checked the clock above the door, a habit I'd developed. I heard a car pull into the lot. I looked at the monitor. A sedan. Dark-colored, maybe navy or black. It pulled into the spot directly in front of the entrance, which most people didn't use because it was at an angle that made it hard to open the driver's door fully. The headlights went off. No one got out. I watched for about 2 minutes. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall. Wearing a dark jacket and khaki pants. Maybe 50, maybe older. He walked to the front door with an unhurried pace and came inside. The door chime sounded, 2 soft electronic tones. "Evening," I said. He walked to the counter and placed a prescription on the glass. Folded once, neatly. He didn't say anything. I unfolded it. It was from a Dr. Rana Hale, written on a pad from the Carden Medical Group. The prescription was for hydroxyzine, 25 milligrams, 30 tablets. An anti-anxiety medication. Completely unremarkable. I looked at the patient name. Edward Call. "Can I see your ID?" I asked. He produced a Missouri driver's license. The photo matched. The name matched. The address was in Carden. I ran it through the system. His profile came up. Active insurance. No drug interactions on file. No flags. Everything was clean. I went to the back to fill it. It took me about 8 minutes. Standard count, standard label, standard bag. When I came back to the window, he was standing exactly where I'd left him. Hands at his sides. Not looking at his phone. Not browsing the aisles. Just standing. Hydroxyzine, 25 milligrams, 30 tablets, I said. Take one as needed for anxiety, up to 3 times daily. May cause drowsiness. Avoid alcohol. He nodded. That'll be $4.60 with your insurance. He paid cash. Exact change. I handed him the bag. He took it, turned, and walked out. The door chimed. I watched him on the monitor. He got in his car, started it, and pulled away. I stood there for a moment, trying to understand what I was feeling. Because Dale was right. Everything about the interaction had been correct. Medically, procedurally, legally, flawless. The prescription was legitimate. The ID was real. The insurance processed. The medication was appropriate. But something was wrong. It took me most of the next hour to identify it, and when I did, I felt a strange coolness move through my chest. He hadn't blinked. Not once. Not during the entire interaction. I'd been facing him across the counter for the better part of 10 minutes, checking his ID, explaining the medication, processing the payment, and he had not blinked. I was sure of it. Not the way you're sure of something you observed carefully, but the way you're sure of something your body registered before your mind did. The way you know a sound was wrong before you can explain what was off about it. I told myself I was being ridiculous. People blink. Maybe I just hadn't noticed. Maybe I was tired. I wrote it off and went back to my book. 2 weeks later, Edward Call came back. Same time. Same car. Same spot in the lot. Same folded prescription on the counter. This time it was for diphenhydramine, Benadryl, essentially, in prescription strength. Same doctor. Same clean insurance run. Same exact change. This time, I watched. He didn't blink. I counted in my head. I maintained eye contact for as long as felt professionally reasonable and then some. His eyes were brown, and they were open, and they did not close. Not a flutter. Not a half blink. Nothing. His eyes were also dry. I noticed this because, as a pharmacist, I'm trained to observe. People who don't blink develop visible dryness, redness, irritation. His eyes should have been screaming. They weren't. They were clear. Moist. Healthy looking. But they did not blink. I filled the prescription. I handed it over. He left. I sat behind the counter for a long time after that, listening to the hum of the fluorescents and the click of the refrigeration unit, and I thought about calling someone. But who? And what would I say? A customer doesn't blink. That's not a complaint. That's not a crime. That's barely an observation. Over the next 3 months, Edward Call came in 7 more times. Always between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. Always on a Tuesday. Always with a neatly folded prescription from Dr. Rana Hale. The medications varied: loratadine, melatonin, cetirizine, low-dose aspirin, all benign. All legitimate. All processed without issue. And every time, he stood perfectly still at the counter, paid in exact change, and did not blink. I started keeping a personal log. Not in the pharmacy system, in a notebook I kept in my bag. I wrote down the dates, times, medications, and my observations. I also started noting the temperature in the store when he arrived, because I realized something else: the thermostat dropped. Not dramatically. Not enough to trigger the heating system. But the digital thermometer I kept on the dispensing counter would read 68 degrees all night, and when Edward Call walked in, it would read 64. Sometimes 63. And when he left, it would climb back up within 15 minutes. I checked the HVAC system. I had the store owner send a technician. Everything was functioning normally. In February, I decided to look into Dr. Rana Hale. The Carden Medical Group's office was on the east side of town, a small brick building I'd driven past many times. I went during the day, on my day off. The office was open. A receptionist greeted me. I asked if Dr. Hale was available. She looked at me with a polite, blank expression. "I'm sorry, who?" "Dr. Rana Hale. She's a prescriber here. I've been filling her prescriptions at Howell's." The receptionist turned to her computer and typed for a moment. "We don't have a Dr. Hale on staff. Are you sure you have the right practice?" I described the prescription pad. The logo. The address printed at the top. She frowned. "That's our logo, and that's our address. But we don't have a physician by that name. We have Dr. Went and Dr. Passos. That's it. That's been it for the last 6 years." I drove back to the pharmacy that afternoon, hours before my shift. I pulled up every prescription I'd filled for Edward Call and checked the prescriber field. Dr. Rana Hale. Carden Medical Group. The NPI number, the national provider identifier that every prescriber has, was valid. I ran it through the registry. It came back as belonging to Dr. Rana Hale, with a practice address at the Carden Medical Group. The system said she existed. The office said she didn't. That night, I called the NPI registry's verification line. I gave them the number. They confirmed it was active and registered to a Dr. Rana Hale in Carden, Missouri. I asked for any additional details: graduation, school, specialty. The representative paused. "That's odd," she said. "The record exists, but the supplemental fields are empty. No school. No graduation year. No specialty. No secondary practice location. Is that normal?" "No," she said. "It's not." I started losing sleep. Not during my shifts, I was alert at the pharmacy, almost hyper-alert. But during the day, when I was supposed to be resting, I'd lie on my bed in the small apartment I'd rented on Oak Street and stare at the ceiling and think about Edward Call's eyes. In March, I tried something. He came in on a Tuesday, 2:22 a.m. Same prescription. This time, famotidine, an antacid. I filled it, and as I handed him the bag, I said, "How have you been feeling, Edward? Any side effects from the medications?" It was a normal pharmacist question. Completely within my professional scope. He looked at me. Those unblinking eyes settled on mine. "Fine," he said. It was the first time I'd heard him speak since that initial visit. His voice was even, flat, with no particular accent. Not robotic. Not strange. Just, uninflected. Like a word spoken by someone who understood language but had no emotional attachment to it. "Good," I said. "Let me know if anything changes." He took the bag. He left. I wrote it down. Spoke. One word. Fine. No inflection. No follow-up. Then I added something that I didn't fully understand at the time but that felt important. He answered the question he wanted to answer, not the one I asked. I'd asked 2 questions. "How have you been feeling, and any side effects?" He said, "Fine." But which question was he answering? Both. Neither. And why did I feel, with a certainty I couldn't defend, that he wasn't answering either one, that "fine" was simply the word he'd selected to end the interaction? In April, I did something I probably shouldn't have. On a Monday, my night off, I drove to the address on Edward Call's driver's license. It was on a road called Piper Lane, about 2 miles south of the pharmacy. Rural. No streetlights. The house was a single-story ranch with beige siding and a gravel driveway. The dark sedan was parked outside. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there, engine idling, looking at the house. Every light was off. But the front door was open. Not wide open. Just ajar. Maybe 6 inches. And through the gap, there was nothing. No hallway light. No glow from a TV. Just a solid, featureless dark that seemed to have a weight to it. I sat there for 10 minutes. The door didn't move. No one appeared. The house was silent. Then, as I was about to put the car in reverse, I noticed something that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. The sedan in the driveway was running. The headlights were off. No exhaust visible in the cold air, but the dashboard instruments were glowing faintly through the windshield. A dim green light. The car was on. As if someone was about to leave. Or had just arrived. I drove away. I didn't go back. The next night, Tuesday, Edward Call came to the pharmacy at 2:11 a.m. Same routine. Same folded prescription. But this time, as I took the paper from the counter, our fingers made contact for a fraction of a second. His skin was room temperature. Not cold. Not warm. Exactly the temperature of the air in the pharmacy. 68 degrees. As if his body wasn't generating heat. As if he was just occupying space at whatever temperature the space happened to be. I filled the prescription. I don't remember what it was. I think it was something for allergies. I logged it, but that page of my notebook is smudged. I spilled coffee on it later, and the ink bled. That night, after he left, I checked the security camera footage. I rewound to his arrival. I watched him park, get out, walk to the door. I watched the entire interaction from the camera's angle, which only captured the entrance and a sliver of the counter area. Then I rewound further. I wanted to see his car pull into the lot. At 2:09 a.m. on the footage, the parking lot was empty. At 2:10 a.m., the car was there. Already parked. Already still. No headlights. No arrival. I rewound further. Frame by frame. At 2 hours 9 minutes and 44 seconds, the lot was empty. At 2 hours 9 minutes and 45 seconds, the car was in the space. It didn't pull in. It didn't approach from the road. In the space between two frames, between 2 seconds, it simply existed where it hadn't before. I rewound and watched it 4 more times. Same result. The car appeared. Frame cut. There. I saved that footage to a USB drive. I put the drive in my bag. The next morning, at home, I plugged it into my laptop. The file was corrupted. Not just the segment I wanted. The entire drive was unreadable. My laptop didn't even recognize it as a storage device. I bought a new USB drive. The following Tuesday, I saved the footage again. Corrupted. The third time, I tried recording the monitor with my phone. I propped it up on the counter and let it run from 1:30 a.m. onward. Edward Call came in at 2:17 a.m. I filled his prescription. He left. Afterward, I checked my phone. The recording was intact. Clear. Perfectly functional. Except for a gap. From 2:08 to 2:18, the video was black. Not corrupted. Not glitched. Black. As if the phone had recorded 10 minutes of perfect darkness, bookended by normal footage of an empty pharmacy. The audio, however, was intact. I listened to it with earbuds, sitting in the back room at 3 a.m., and I heard something that made me set the phone down and not touch it again for the rest of the night. During the 10-minute blackout, there were 2 voices. Mine. And his. The conversation I could hear was not the conversation I remembered having. In my memory, the interaction had been the same as always. Prescription. ID, fill. Counsel. Payment. Bag. Goodbye. Routine. On the audio, it started that way. I could hear myself greet him. I could hear the rustle of the prescription on the counter. The tap of my keyboard. Normal sounds. Then, at approximately the 2:12 mark, I heard myself say something I have no memory of saying. Is it the same one? And his voice, that flat, uninflected voice, responded, it's always the same one. Then silence. A long silence. 30, maybe 40 seconds. Then my voice again, I don't want to fill this. His voice, you already did. Then the normal sounds resumed. The register. The bag. The chime of the door. As if nothing had happened. I played it back 7 times. The words didn't change. My voice was calm on the recording. Not frightened. Not confused. Calm. As if I were having a conversation I'd had before. But I had no memory of it. None. I started sleeping even less. I went to a doctor in a town 30 miles away. I didn't want to go to the Carton Medical Group, and got a prescription for a low-dose sleep aid. I didn't fill it at Howell's. I drove to a CVS 2 counties over. The sleep aid helped a little. But every Tuesday night, I sat behind that counter and waited, and when the headlights didn't sweep across the lot but the car simply appeared in the space, and when Edward Call walked through the door with his folded prescription and his unblinking eyes and his room temperature skin, I filled the prescription and I let him leave. Because what else was I going to do? In May, 2 things happened that changed everything. The first was small. I was restocking shelves during a slow Thursday night, not a Tuesday, not an Edward Call night, when I found a prescription bag behind the insulin refrigerator. It must have fallen back there. The bag was stapled shut, labeled, and dated from 3 years prior. Long before my time. The patient name was Edward Call. The prescriber was Dr. Rana Hale. The medication was hydroxyzine, 25 milligrams, 30 tablets. It was identical to the first prescription I'd filled for him. But the date was from 3 years ago. Meaning Dale had filled this. Dale, who'd spent 22 years at Howells. Dale, who'd told me about the feeling. Dale, who'd moved to Florida and disconnected his phone. I opened the bag. Inside was the medication, untouched. The seal was intact. The pills were all there. He'd never taken them. I went back through the dispensing logs, the official ones, in the system, and searched for Edward Call. I found records going back 7 years, as far as the digital system went. Prescriptions filled every few weeks. All from Dr. Rana Hale. All benign medications. Antihistamines. Antacids. Low-dose sleep aids. Anti-anxiety. Nothing controlled. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that would raise a red flag in any audit. But the pattern was meticulous. Identical. Every few weeks, for at least 7 years. Who fills prescriptions for 7 years and never takes the medication? The second thing that happened in May was worse. I was organizing my personal log, the notebook, transferring some of my observations to a more coherent timeline. I'd been writing in it for months, and the early entries were messy, scattered. I wanted to create a clean chronology. As I flipped through the pages, I found entries I didn't recognize. They were in my handwriting. I'm certain of that. I know my own hand. The slight leftward slant, the way I cross my T's with a low bar, the cramped spacing I use when I'm writing quickly. It was my writing. But I hadn't written these entries. They were between my entries, in the margins and in gaps I'd left on pages. Short. Fragmentary. One said, "He is not picking up medication." Another, "The prescriptions are the transaction. The medication is irrelevant." And, near the back of the notebook, in handwriting that was mine but shakier, as if written in a moving car or in the dark. "I think he is purchasing something else. I think the prescription is a receipt. I think each time he comes in, something is exchanged, and I am part of the exchange, and I do not know what I am giving him." I read that entry 6 times, sitting on my apartment floor with the notebook on my knees and the afternoon light coming through the blinds in yellow bars. I had not written it. But it was my handwriting. And the worst part, the part that made me close the notebook and put it in a drawer and not look at it for a week, was that I agreed with it. The logic was sound. The observation was correct. Edward Call never took the medication. The medications were irrelevant. The prescriber didn't exist at the practice that bore her name. The prescriptions were valid but purposeless. The act of filling them, the act of the exchange, the paper across the counter, the bag handed over, the brief contact of skin, that was the point. Something was being transacted. And I was part of it. In June, I installed a second camera. I bought a small motion-activated trail camera, the kind hunters use, and mounted it inside the pharmacy, behind a display of reading glasses, aimed at the counter. I didn't tell the store owner. I didn't tell anyone. The next Tuesday, Edward Call came in at 2:03 a.m. I filled his prescription. He left. The trail camera captured the entire interaction. I reviewed the footage on my laptop at home, sitting at my kitchen table with the blinds closed and a glass of water I never drank. The footage showed me behind the counter. It showed Edward Call in front of it. The interaction looked normal. I took the prescription. I went to the back. I returned. I handed him the bag. He left. But at the 2:09 mark, something happened that the camera caught and I had no memory of. After I handed him the bag, I reached under the counter. I pulled out a small amber prescription bottle, the standard type, orange plastic, white cap, and I placed it on the counter between us. Edward Call picked it up and put it in his jacket pocket. Then the normal interaction resumed. Payment. Departure. I had no memory of this. None. I went to the pharmacy that night, hours before my shift. I looked under the counter where, on the footage, I'd reached. There was a shelf there. I knew about it. It held spare bags, a stapler, some rubber bands. In the back corner of the shelf, there was an amber prescription bottle. It was empty. No label. No medication inside. But it wasn't entirely empty. Inside the bottle, there was a small, folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a pharmacy label. The kind our system prints. Patient name, medication, dosage, prescriber, date. The patient name was mine. The medication was listed as renewal. The prescriber was Dr. Rana Hale. The date was 6 months in the future. 3:47 a.m. I mentioned that time at the beginning of this account. The dispensing log entry I found last Tuesday. My handwriting. A prescription filled for a patient not in the system, at a time I was supposedly alone. I went back through the trail camera footage from that night. The camera was still there, still recording. At 3:45 a.m., I was behind the counter. Alone. I was standing still, facing the empty pharmacy, my hands at my sides. I was not moving. For 2 full minutes, I stood there, motionless, staring at nothing. Then, at 3:47, I turned to the dispensing counter. I began filling a prescription. My movements were efficient, practiced. I counted pills. I labeled a bottle. I bagged it. I stapled the bag shut. Then I walked around the counter to the front of the pharmacy, and I placed the bag on the counter. On the customer's side. And I walked back. And I waited. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then a hand reached into frame and took the bag. The camera's angle didn't capture who it belonged to. Just a hand. Reaching from the right side of the frame, from a part of the store that I knew was an empty aisle. Nobody had come through the door. The chime hadn't sounded. The parking lot on the monitor was empty. A hand took the bag. And then I returned to my stool, sat down, and resumed reading my book as if nothing had happened. I watched myself on that footage, sitting there reading, and I understood that I was watching someone who had no idea what he'd just done. The man on the screen was calm, comfortable, undisturbed. He turned a page. He sipped his coffee. He was at peace. I am telling you this from my apartment. It's 4 p.m. on a Sunday. My shift starts in 6 hours. The label I found in the amber bottle, the one with my name, with the medication listed as renewal, with the date 6 months in the future, that date is this coming Tuesday. Tomorrow night. I don't know what renewal means. I don't know what I've been giving Edward Call. I don't know what Dr. Rana Hale is, because I no longer believe she's a who. I don't know why the prescriptions are always benign, always valid, always pointless. I don't know why the car appears between frames. I don't know why he doesn't blink. I don't know why his skin is the temperature of the air around him. I don't know why I write things I don't remember writing. I don't know why I fill prescriptions I don't remember filling. I don't know what is being exchanged. But I know this: every transaction has two sides. Something is given and something is received. For 7 years, probably longer, someone has stood behind that counter and handed something to Edward Call, and whatever it wasn't hydroxyzine or famotidine or cetirizine. And tomorrow night, the prescription has my name on it. I thought about not going in. I thought about quitting, driving to my brother's place, leaving Carden behind. I thought about it for a long time. But this evening, I found something that made me understand I'm not going to do any of that. I was getting dressed. Pulling on a shirt. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, and I stopped. There's a mark on my chest. Over my sternum. I don't know when it appeared. It's not a bruise. It's not a rash. It's a small, neat rectangle, about the size of a pharmacy label, where the skin is slightly lighter than the surrounding tissue. As if something had been adhered there and removed. As if a label had been stuck to my skin and peeled off, leaving a faint, clean outline. I touched it. The skin was smooth. Cool. Room temperature. I'm going to go to work tomorrow night. I'm going to stand behind the counter. And at 3:47 a.m., I think I'm going to fill a prescription for myself, with a medication called Renewal, prescribed by a doctor who exists in the system but not in the world. And I think someone, or something, is going to come and pick it up. And I think I've done this before. I think Dale did it before me. And someone did it before Dale. 22 years. Probably longer. The building used to be a hardware store. Before that, I don't know. But I think the counter has always been there, in some form. A place where something is handed over. Where a transaction occurs. Where someone stands on one side and something stands on the other, and an exchange is made in the small hours when the world is asleep and the only sound is the hum of the lights and the click of the refrigeration and the soft, papery push of air through the vents. I think the pharmacy is just the current shape of something older. And I think I am what is being dispensed. It's quiet in my apartment right now. The clock on the microwave reads 4:47 p.m. The afternoon light is turning amber through the blinds. Somewhere down the street, a dog is barking in short, regular intervals, like a metronome. I just checked my reflection again. The mark on my chest is slightly larger than it was an hour ago. And my eyes, in the mirror, I watched them. I watched them for a long time. I'm not sure I blinked.